he's chasing bootleggers down the streets of Paducah. He uncovers a ring of gamblers, bootleggers, corrupt magistrates, lots of bribery. He gets into a fistfight with a gambler over his reporting and stories. He believes deeply in public power, so he coordinates with Happy Chandler to get the rural electrification bill passed. And of course, he starts with an $800,000 appropriation in 1948 and spins that into a $2 million parks program. If you looked him up, you could find nothing. There was one reference in the Kentucky Encyclopedia that said he was one of the few Democrats to lose a governor's race in 25 years.
The man who made Kentucky modern. That's how Sharon Roggenkamp, author of The Life and Times of Hammer and Hank Ward, describes the central character of her book. If you travel through the Commonwealth today, you're living Hank Ward's legacy. From the road beneath your tires to the state park system where you hike, swim, fish, and boat. This week on the Crossroads Suncast, how a crusading reporter reshaped the state of Kentucky as a New Deal politician, and the blind spots that kept him out of the governor's chair. A remarkable life from the Paducah Sun Democrat to Frankfort and back again. I'm Bryce Patterson. Born in McCracken County in 1909, Roggenkamp says Ward's early life is marked by tragedy.
His father was accidentally burned in a fire. And so there were 8 children. Mom pulls the family together. The sense I got from my research material was it shaped him in a way that at the age of 5, he knows that life is fragile and it can change in an instant. They pulled together, they farmed for a while in Paducah. Then she opened a boarding house, and then he went on through school.
Ward's family is poor, and he can't afford to go to college. After graduating from Tillman High School, he's working at a drugstore.
His high school principal sends him down to the Paducah Sun Democrat office. They interview him. They offer him a 2-week probation at $12 a week. And it was basically kind of a boot camp. The editors and the proofreaders would throw the stories at you. And if you succeeded after 2 weeks, you could stay. And he thrived doing that, moved to the day side in the early 30s. And that's when he really took off as a crusading reporter. He had a very strong interest in local government and how local government worked.
Alongside his interest in politics, Henry Hank Ward proves to be a tough reporter, willing to take on crime.
His specific focus was on the bootleggers, gamblers, all of that going on. So as he's explaining government, exposing corruption at the other end of the spectrum on Paducah, it was a thriving riverfront town. He talks about the movie theaters. He talks about dancing on the rooftops of local hotels. It was a sleepy backwater agricultural town. It was about that whole region was strawberries, crops. There was a lot of mussel fishing. And both Mr. Paxton, Fred Paxton, told me that because of the geographical isolation, sort of the agricultural riverfront setting down there, most times West Kentucky often felt isolated and kind of cut off from the state politically.
Through his work as a reporter, Ward finds a place where his interests in politics and protecting vulnerable people meet.
So he kept grumbling about the Paducah Railroad workers were in the clutches of loan sharks who were charging 200% interest on payday loans at the time in his community. And he said, somebody has to do something about it. So a local businessman said, okay, run for the legislature and do something about it.
His other key issue, electrical utilities, which he sees as overcharging local people and underperforming. His solution? Running for the Kentucky House of Representatives.
He's like, okay, I'll run. I don't think he expected to win, but he did. So he goes up there as one of the youngest legislators, and he makes one mistake. He says, I'm not for any new taxes, which in the end he had to cave in on that issue. But he did go up and he gets it was really a capstone for him to get the payday lending bill passed. And his municipal utility bill finally passed in 1936.
Ward's a young man when he arrives in Frankfurt.
He was very cocky, very obnoxious. And after he had several sort of public defeats on that, he decided, I need to stop crusading and I need to learn how the legislature works.
Ward's known as a straight talker and has a reputation for honesty and a focus on details.
He would throw his glasses on his desk and say, give me the facts. We can't make decisions for Kentuckians unless we have all the facts. And he was very impatient. So being a reporter, especially a crusading reporter, just really molded him into the person he was and made his philosophy of government.
He could also be abrasive and rough around the edges. A former Kentucky governor once described Ward as a, quote, bare-knuckle politician.
He's a study in contradictions. One of his staffers said, he never spoke an unkind word to me, but he gave unshirted hell to people he thought deserved it.
Entering the Kentucky House in the early 1930s, Ward's politics are a microcosm of the work being done by President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal on the national level. The result? A flurry of major infrastructure projects, modernizing Kentucky.
But here's what he does in a span of about 15 years. He believes deeply in public power, so he coordinates with Happy Chandler to get the rural electrification bill passed. This is huge for Kentuckians who are isolated and don't have any power.
For context, nearly 90% of farms nationwide didn't have electricity. By 1950, that number is closer to 20%.
Then he goes on to the bitter battle over TVA power, which stretched on for a couple of years and a couple of sessions. But eventually, he gets that bill passed, and it literally dominated radio and newspaper coverage during the early 40s when they were trying to pass that bill to get the hydroelectric dam. So again, once the dam comes in, you have West Kentucky totally transformed by the dam and the park. He sponsored the bill that allowed Kentucky to participate in the Ohio Regional Sanitary Commission, which was a 6-state compact that brought sanitary water and cleaner water rivers to the state. And of course, he starts with an $800,000 appropriation in 1948 and spins that into a $2 million parks program that's eventually in 55, it's featured on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post.
That focus on public works projects will be central throughout Ward's career. It also highlights the limits of his perspective. Kentucky Dam, damming the Tennessee River between Marshall and Livingston counties, is the longest in the Tennessee Valley Authority system. It's a major source of hydroelectric power, and the creation of the dam also created Kentucky Lake. But rising waters from the project wiped out the small town of Birmingham, Kentucky.
People did have to move. It was a sort of a poor area, but never in my research, and never did he mention how it would displace Kentuckians or how it would change the character of the region. That was not on his radar, because this is a New Deal politician who thinks the only way I can help people is to build things. So that issue of displacement was never really on his radar.
That area, land between the lakes, became a national recreation area in 1963. Another vital part of Ward's legacy is his reshaping of the Commonwealth's system of state parks. In the 1940s, Kentucky's parks looked fundamentally different from today.
It was mainly about preserving historic shrines and sites. It was a dilapidated patchwork. Legislators didn't think parks were important, even though nationally, especially Cumberland Falls, it was one of a great palace of scenic beauty. By the time Ward gets into the legislature, every single year, even though park attendance is growing, they only budget $35,000 a year. World War II hits, and you have tons of soldiers even being bunked at the parks and passing through the parks. The appropriations stay the same. So he really gets a bee in his bonnet on this. He goes to the state Senate in the mid-40s, and in 48, he gets an $800,000 parks appropriation, which is historically the most ever.
As Commissioner of Conservation, Hank Ward led the expansion of new infrastructure and a rethinking of the park's mission.
He visited Old Kentucky Home And it was so beautiful and historic, and he saw a mom with 2 young boys, and they were sliding down the banisters, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, we need to build parks where families can come and have fun and not worry about breaking a precious artifact." So he's building modern, lodges, modern cottages. He's obsessed with making it affordable for families. He has, at the lake, for instance, he has an airport, a place where you can clean your fish, marinas. Kentucky really, spends the money and transforms it.
Ward leaves government briefly, but returns in 1960 to lead the expansion of Kentucky's highways. His signature style and approach to politics continues.
He was in one meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers. He was there. There was a general there running the meeting in Washington, D.C., and they made a presentation. He was highway commissioner at the time. His engineer was sitting there with him, and after the staff assistants made the presentation, Henry turned to the general, looks him straight in the eye, and says, "Bullshit." And so the general sits there for a minute, and he said there was a very tense silence, and the general burst out laughing and said, "Okay, Commissioner Ward, let's get together and do this your way."
During his 6 years as highway commissioner, much of Kentucky's interstate system is built or designed. According to the Kentucky Transportation Center, Hank Ward personally conducted public hearings to shape the location of interstate routes and convinced the federal government to build Interstate 24 through western Kentucky. That expansion of roadways feeds back into Ward's parks projects, making it easier to travel across the state to Kentucky's parks and connecting West Kentucky more closely to the rest of the Commonwealth. His record on state projects and infrastructure shapes his next major step in the 1960s, a run for governor of Kentucky.
Many people that I interviewed, those contemporaries said he was too honest, he was too abrasive, he was unwilling to campaign. Then he's running against Louis Nunn, who is tall, handsome, an effective speaker, but he is not.
Ward has a wealth of experience as a reformer and civil servant, but the political landscape in 1967 is radically different from the world where he started his political career.
I think the Democratic Party nominees underestimated the strength of that new movement. They were about building bridges, parks, hospitals, playgrounds. What they didn't understand was that it was about Vietnam, civil rights, and social issues. And they just didn't make that transition.
Roggenkamp says Ward's run for governor fails because he's unable to change with the times.
My take on that race is that it was really the end of New Deal politics in Kentucky. You have a grassroots movement, very solid in the state for civil rights. Governor Breathitt and Governor Combs are very progressive on civil rights. So there are 10 nominees that spring for the governor's race, and all of them say we support civil rights, but we do not support an open housing law.
The Kentucky Fair Housing Act, prohibiting discrimination in housing based on race and other protected factors, passes in 1968 as part of Kentucky's broader Civil Rights Act.
A lot of Democrats stayed home and just didn't vote because they were so weary by all those social issues in the 60s.
Ward's opponent, Louis Nunn, becomes the first Republican governor of Kentucky since 1947. Roggenkamp says, that election loss was a huge disappointment for Ward. Returning to Paducah, Ward comes full circle, taking on a role as publisher at the Paducah Sun. But he doesn't feel well suited to the job, managing the business side of the newspaper, and moves to Florida in the 1970s. Ward retired from public life, with Kentucky Educational Television producing a documentary about his life in 1992. Ward's front-page obituary in the Paducah Sun in 2002 highlighted his decades of public service and his honesty. Roggenkamp says a major part of his legacy, through his work on parks and roads, was bringing statewide attention to West Kentucky.
The physical visibility now of that section of the state is what opened the door for people who visited to maybe say, oh, this is a nice community, or, oh, maybe I could open a business here. So I think he was just more of a door opener because, again, he was prickly, he was independent, he was a member of the Democratic Party, the state party, but if the Republicans introduced a bill that he felt was going to help every county in the state, he's going to vote for that bill. he was very independent that way. So he really just opened the door for the state by putting it literally on the map.
If there's a story you'd like to see on Season 2 of the Crossroads Suncast, let us know. Email us at newstip@wpsdlocal6.com.